In the bustling streets of early 1980s San Francisco, where dreams often felt out of reach for most, one man refused to accept that fate. His name was Marcus Hale. A single father in his late 20s, Marcus was barely scraping by. He sold medical equipment door to door, but the commissions were slim, the bills were piling up, and his marriage had already fallen apart. The only thing keeping him going was his 5-year-old son, little Marcus Jr., his world, his reason to fight. Every day Marcus woke up with the same burning question: how do I give my son the life he deserves? He wasn't born with money or connections. No college degree. No safety net. Just a relentless belief that somewhere out there was a better path, if he could just find it. One ordinary afternoon, while walking down the crowded sidewalk with his son in tow, Marcus spotted something that would change everything. A sharply dressed stockbroker stepped out of a bright red Ferrari, briefcase in hand, confidence radiating from him like sunlight. Marcus stopped dead in his tracks. He watched the man disappear into a towering office building, and in that moment something clicked. That's it, he thought. That's the life I want for us. Not just money, freedom. The kind of freedom that lets you provide, protect, and never worry again. But Marcus had no experience in finance. No contacts on Wall Street. No fancy resume. He was just a broke salesman with a kid to feed. Yet instead of walking away defeated, he made a decision that would test every ounce of his strength. He was going to become a stockbroker, no matter what it took. Even if it meant starting from absolute zero. Even if the world laughed at him. Even if it meant sleeping on the streets. Because for Marcus Hale, giving up was never an option. This is the true inspired story of a father who went from homeless and hopeless to building a multimillion-dollar empire. And it all started with one spark of hope on a crowded sidewalk. Marcus Hale wasn't born into opportunity. He grew up in a rough neighborhood in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, raised mostly by his single mother, Betty Jean, a woman who worked tirelessly to keep food on the table, but couldn't shield her son from the harsh realities around him. His childhood was marked by poverty, instability, and pain. There were long stretches of absence from his father, who left early on. Stepfathers came and went, some violent, some absent. Marcus witnessed domestic arguments, felt the sting of hunger, and learned early that life didn't hand out second chances easily. But even in the darkness, Marcus had fire inside him. He was smart, driven, and determined not to repeat the cycle. After high school, he joined the U.S. Navy as a hospital corpsman, hoping it would be his ticket out. He served with honor, learned discipline, and even started a family. Back in civilian life, Marcus tried to build something stable. He married his first wife and they had a son together. But the marriage didn't last. Tensions rose, arguments escalated, and eventually the relationship ended in divorce. Desperate for a fresh start and better money, Marcus moved to San Francisco with his new girlfriend, Jackie. She was pregnant with their son, little Marcus Jr., and for a while things felt promising. Marcus poured everything into a new venture, selling medical equipment door to door. Bone density scanners, expensive machines doctors needed. He believed this was his big break. He invested every dollar he had. He borrowed money, maxed out credit cards, and even sold the family home to buy more inventory. But the sales were slow. Doctors weren't buying. The commissions trickled in too little, too late. The bills piled higher. The bank foreclosed on the house. Creditors called non-stop. Jackie grew frustrated with the constant stress. Arguments turned into fights. One day she left, taking their newborn son with her. Suddenly Marcus was alone. Broke. In debt. With no home, no savings, and a 5-year-old son to care for. He had hit rock bottom faster than he ever imagined. But instead of giving up, Marcus held on tighter to his dream. He refused to let his son grow up the way he did, without hope, without a father who fought for him. And that's when that one moment on the sidewalk, the glimpse of the stockbroker in the red Ferrari, ignited a new fire. Marcus knew the road ahead would be brutal. He knew it would test every limit he had. But he also knew one thing for certain. He would never stop fighting. The dream that had sparked on that crowded sidewalk now felt like a cruel joke. Marcus Hale had lost everything. His home, his savings, his relationship. All that remained was his 5-year-old son, and the crushing weight of responsibility. With no money for rent and no family nearby to turn to, Marcus and little Marcus Jr. became homeless. They carried their few belongings in a single duffel bag. During the day, Marcus kept pushing forward, making cold calls, trying to sell his scanners, chasing any lead that might bring in cash. But at night, when the city lights dimmed and the offices closed, reality hit hardest. They slept wherever they could find shelter. Church basements that opened their doors to the homeless. Public transit stations after the last train left. Once, they even locked themselves in a subway bathroom overnight to stay out of the cold and rain. Marcus would lay his coat on the filthy floor as a makeshift bed. He'd pull his son close, whispering stories to keep him calm. "Everything's gonna be okay, little man. Daddy's got you." But inside, Marcus was terrified. Terrified that he was failing the one person who depended on him completely. There were days when they had nothing to eat. Marcus would skip meals so his son could have the last bit of food. He'd smile through the hunger, pretending everything was fine, while his stomach growled and his mind raced with fear. The internship at Dean Witter, the unpaid stockbroker training he'd fought so hard to get, was supposed to be his way out. But it was brutal. He had to show up every day in a suit he could barely keep clean, smiling and confident while his shoes had holes and his son waited in daycare or sometimes even at the office lobby. Coworkers didn't know his secret. He never told them he was homeless. He never told them that after a long day of studying market trends and cold calling strangers, he'd walk miles to the nearest shelter just to make sure his son had a safe place to sleep. One night stands out above the rest. Marcus and his son had been turned away from every shelter, full, no room left. They wandered the streets until they found a public bathroom at the Bay Area Rapid Transit Station. Marcus locked the door from the inside. He sat on the cold tile floor, holding his sleeping son in his arms, listening to the trains rumble overhead. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered into the darkness. "I'm sorry, little man. I'm so sorry. But I promise, I'm not giving up. One day we're gonna have a home. We're gonna have everything." In that moment, rock bottom wasn't just a place. It was a feeling, a deep, aching certainty that life had beaten him down as far as it could. But even there, in the filth and the cold, Marcus Hale made a vow to himself. He would rise. Not for money. Not for status. But for the little boy sleeping in his arms. Because some dreams are worth every tear, every sleepless night, every humiliation. And Marcus was just getting started. In the middle of the chaos, sleeping in subway bathrooms, skipping meals, carrying his son on his back, Marcus Hale refused to let the dream die. One crisp afternoon, while walking little Marcus Jr. to daycare before heading to another dead-end sales call, something happened that would change the trajectory of his life forever. They were crossing a busy San Francisco street when a gleaming red Ferrari pulled up to the curb. A sharply dressed man in an expensive suit stepped out, confident, successful, untouchable. Marcus froze. He stared at the car. He stared at the man. And in that split second, a question burned into his mind. How does someone like that get to drive a car like that? He turned to a nearby security guard and asked the only question that mattered. "What does that guy do for a living?" The guard glanced over and answered casually. "He's a stockbroker." Marcus's heart started pounding. Stockbroker. The word echoed in his head like a promise. He didn't know much about Wall Street, but he knew one thing. Stockbrokers made real money. The kind of money that could get him and his son out of the streets. The kind of money that could give them a real home, real security, real hope. Right then and there, Marcus made a decision that most people would have called crazy. He was going to become a stockbroker. He had no finance degree, no connections, no experience. He was homeless, in debt, and barely keeping his son fed. But none of that mattered. He went straight to the library and started reading everything he could find about the stock market. He studied late into the night after his son fell asleep, using whatever light he could find, scribbling notes on scraps of paper. Then came the big break. Marcus learned about a rare opportunity, an unpaid internship at Dean Witter Reynolds, one of the biggest brokerage firms in the country. It was a long shot. Hundreds of applicants with Ivy League degrees and polished resumes. Marcus had none of those things. But he had something they didn't, unbreakable hunger. He dressed in his one decent suit, the one he kept clean at all costs, walked into that interview, looked the manager in the eye and said, I may not have the background, but I promise you this. I will be the best trainee you've ever had. I will outwork everyone. Give me a chance and I'll prove it. The manager saw something in Marcus's eyes. Raw determination, the kind that can't be taught. He got the internship. It wasn't paid. It was 6 months of grueling training, studying for the Series 7 exam, cold calling strangers all day, while still homeless and raising his son alone. Most people would have quit. Marcus saw it as his lifeline. This was the turning point. The moment the underdog decided he would no longer accept the hand life had dealt him. He was going to rewrite the story. Marcus Hale had his foot in the door, but the door was slamming shut every single day. The Dean Witter internship was no golden ticket. It was unpaid. It was 6 months of pure survival. And it was designed to break people. Marcus had to study for the Series 7 exam, the brutal licensing test every stockbroker must pass. He had to cold call hundreds of strangers every day from a tiny cubicle, selling stocks he barely understood himself. He had to show up every morning looking sharp, sounding confident, while inside he was exhausted, hungry, and terrified of failing. And he had to do all of this while still homeless and raising a 5-year-old son alone. There were mornings when Marcus would wake up in a shelter or on a park bench, get his son ready, drop him at daycare, sometimes begging the staff to let him pay later, then rush across the city to the brokerage office. He'd spend the day dialing numbers, getting hung up on, rejected, laughed at. "Sir, I'm not interested." Click. Again. And again. Hundreds of calls. Zero sales. At night, after everyone else went home to their families in warm beds, Marcus stayed behind, studying market reports, memorizing formulas, cramming for the exam. He'd sit under the fluorescent lights until the building closed, then walk miles to find a place to sleep. Food was scarce. He'd buy a single hot dog or a bag of popcorn to share with his son, pretending it was a feast. There were nights when the only thing keeping him going was the sound of his son's breathing next to him. The pressure was crushing. His boss was tough. The other interns, most with college degrees and family money, looked down on him. Some even whispered behind his back, "How's this guy even here?" But Marcus never complained. He never told anyone he was homeless. He never let the pain show on his face. Instead, he outworked them all. He made more calls. He studied longer. He smiled through every rejection. He kept telling himself, "This is temporary. This pain is the price of freedom. One day my son and I will look back and be grateful for every hard moment." There were times he almost broke. One evening, after being turned away from yet another shelter, Marcus sat on a curb with his son asleep on his lap. Tears streamed down his face as he looked up at the stars and whispered, "I don't know how much more I can take, but I know I can't quit. Not now. Not ever." That was the grind. 6 months of hell. 6 months of proving, to himself, to the world, to his son, that he was unbreakable. And through every dark night, every slammed door, every empty stomach, Marcus Hale kept moving forward. Because he knew the breakthrough was coming. He just had to survive long enough to reach it. After 6 months of relentless grind, of cold calls, sleepless nights, and endless rejection, the day Marcus Hale had fought for finally arrived. The Series 7 exam. He walked into the testing center with nothing but a borrowed suit, a notebook full of handwritten notes, and the weight of his son's future on his shoulders. 4 hours he answered question after question, every formula memorized, every market trend drilled into his brain under streetlights and in shelter corners. When the test ended, Marcus didn't know if he'd passed. He just knew he'd given everything he had. Days later the results came. He passed. Not just passed, he crushed it. The same day the phone rang at the Dean Witter office. It was the call Marcus had been dreaming of since that afternoon on the sidewalk. "Marcus Hale? Congratulations. You're officially hired as a full-time stockbroker." Tears welled up in his eyes as he hung up the phone. For the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Real, tangible hope. That first paycheck wasn't huge, but it was his. The first steady income he'd had in months. He rushed to pick up his son from daycare, knelt down, and told him the news. "We did it, little man. We're not going to be homeless anymore. Daddy got the job." They moved out of the shelters that very week. A small apartment, a real bed, a refrigerator with food inside. It wasn't luxury, but it was stability. It was dignity. It was the first step toward the life Marcus had promised his son. At the brokerage firm, Marcus hit the ground running. He made calls with the same hunger he'd had when he was broke. He studied the markets like his life depended on it, because it did. Within months, he was one of the top performers. Clients trusted him. Deals closed. Bonuses started rolling in. The man who once slept on subway bathroom floors was now walking into boardrooms, shaking hands with millionaires, and building a future no one thought possible. The breakthrough had come, not by luck, not by handouts, but by sheer unbreakable will. Marcus Hale had survived the grind. He had earned his place. And the best part? The story wasn't over yet. This was just the beginning of something much bigger. With his first real paycheck in hand and a roof over their heads, Marcus Hale didn't slow down. He accelerated. He treated every day at Dean Witter like it was still the internship. Outworking everyone. Making more calls. Building relationships. Learning the markets inside and out. Within a few short years, Marcus became one of the top brokers in the firm. His clients, wealthy individuals, institutions, trusted him because they could feel his hunger, his integrity, his story. But Marcus wasn't content just climbing the ladder. He wanted to own the ladder. In 1987, with savings he'd carefully built and lessons burned into his soul from every hardship, Marcus Hale did the unthinkable. He founded his own brokerage firm, Marcus Hale and Company. He started small. A tiny office. A handful of employees. But he brought the same relentless drive that got him through the streets. The firm grew fast. Marcus focused on what he knew best: hard work, honesty, and putting clients first. He specialized in institutional trading and built a reputation as a broker who delivered results. By the early 2000s, Marcus Hale and Company had become a powerhouse. Marcus had offices across the country. He was managing millions, then tens of millions, in assets. He sold a stake in the firm for a fortune, turning his dream into generational wealth. The man who once carried his sleeping son through subway tunnels now owned luxury homes, drove the kinds of cars he used to stare at, and traveled the world. But the greatest victory wasn't the money. It was the promise he kept to his son. Little Marcus Jr. grew up never knowing hunger, never knowing fear of eviction, never doubting that his father would always fight for him. Today, Marcus Hale is a multimillionaire, a philanthropist, and an internationally sought-after motivational speaker. He's written best-selling books, starred in documentaries, and inspired millions with his story. He often says, "The world will tell you no. Life will knock you down. But as long as you keep getting up, as long as you keep fighting for what matters, anything is possible." Marcus Hale didn't just survive rock bottom. He turned it into a launch pad. From homeless fathers sleeping in public bathrooms, to building a multimillion-dollar empire, all because he refused to quit. This is what real redemption looks like. This is what happens when an underdog decides the story isn't over. Marcus Hale didn't just survive, he transformed. From a homeless father sleeping on cold subway floors, to a multimillionaire entrepreneur, philanthropist, and one of the most sought-after motivational speakers in the world. Today he travels the globe sharing his story. He's written best-selling books that have inspired millions. He founded organizations to help the homeless and underprivileged. And every time he steps on stage, he reminds people of one unbreakable truth. Your current situation is not your final destination. Marcus often says, "The world will tell you no. Life will knock you down 7 times. But if you get up 8, you win." He teaches 3 simple but powerful lessons from his journey. 1. Never let anyone steal your dream. People will laugh, doubt, and tell you it's impossible. Don't listen. Protect your vision like it's the most valuable thing you own. 2. Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Marcus had no connections, no degree, no shortcuts. What he had was relentless effort. Outwork everyone. Every single day. 3. Your lowest moment can become your greatest strength. Rock bottom isn't the end, it's the foundation. Use the pain. Let it fuel you. Because the deeper the struggle, the higher the comeback. Marcus Hale proved that redemption isn't just possible, it's inevitable if you refuse to quit. So wherever you are right now, broken, doubting yourself, hear this. Your story isn't over. The comeback is coming. You just have to keep fighting. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that you're stronger than your circumstances, then hit that like button, drop a comment with your own comeback goal, and subscribe for more true inspired underdog redemption stories that prove it's never too late to rise again. Thank you for watching. Keep fighting. We'll see you in the next story.